Hello and welcome back to Podcasting is Praxis. I'm David, my pronouns are he and him.
I'm James and my pronouns are barely here.
I'm Jamie, my pronouns are he and him.
I'm Rob, mine are he and him.
And I'm Alistair, my pronouns are also he and him.
Excellent. we can take your pronouns as barely here, seeing as you're the one person who doesn't use he and him, so that's technically accurate. Good.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we're all back. We're all here. We're reunited.
I'm like 30% here. I'm still suffering, but I'm here. I was lured in by the siren call of Rob promising financial crimes.
Yep.
By which I mean talking about financial crimes being done in Britain.
Yes, exactly.
Not Rob actually committing financial crimes.
No, God. No.
On the note of promises, I'll just break one now. I don't have any Platinum Jubilee shit prepared because it was a miserable weekend. No one fucking enjoyed it, and let's just forget about it. Job done.
Yeah.
But there was some fun stuff that happened over the weekend. And when I say fun, I mean pointless shit and terrible. We had some political goings on. Rob, do you want to start us off on the energy support package to get this bit out of the way for Jamie?
Yeah, sure. Let's quickly riffle through this one. It was before the weekend.
Left this till after I'd gone. You know what I mean?
We could have, but chose not to.
Nope. So just to riffle through this in the spirit of Paddington Bear. Finally, the Tories finally got off their arse and offered a energy support package that's still a lot better than what Labour was offering, which is incredibly funny. It's still a piece of shit, though. You get 400 quid off as a grant. Everybody, every household in the UK gets 400 quid off, which is no longer a loan. If you're on direct debit, it just goes via your bills. If you're on meters, it goes through either you get a voucher or it's plugged into whatever program you have. And fantastically, because of course this is a Tory design bill, if you have a second home, a third home, a fourth home, and further up than that, for every home you own, you get an additional 400 quid, which is absolutely fantastic.
Fuck off. Mm-hmm. Fuck right off. Just
how else are you going to keep those windowsill bees warm?
Jesus fucking Christ.
So there's a 650 quid one-off cost of living adjustment for people on universal credit, job seekers allowance, and a bunch of other similar credits. It doesn't count toward your cap, which I suppose is good news, but it's also not good news because 650 quid for this calendar year is not nearly going to cover the rising cost of pretty much everything in your life.
I'll take it.
Yeah, of course you will. I mean, I'm not suggesting don't take it. I'm just saying it's probably not going to cover your outgoings.
Good save there, mate. Like, you know what I mean? we all heard the, of course you will. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, to be fair, who fucking wouldn't?
Yeah. It's money. They're giving you money. Why not take the money?
Exactly.
I would take the money. And of course, if you're a pensioner, you will get an additional 300 quid. This is via the winter fuel allowance because, of course, Tories being Tories, they have to bribe the elderly. Not that there's not old people in poverty in the UK, naturally speaking, but it's it's also an electorally useful.
Well, if they didn't have the sense, to buy a house for 50p back in the day, then
that's true.
Quite frankly,
yeah.
I mean, I love the idea that if you're cold and too young, then fuck you, basically, you know?
Yeah, when all of these cunts were cold and too young, they just had to wear more jumpers. That's how it works for them. And that is how it must work for the future generations. Yeah. Things may only remain the same or get worse.
Yeah, the way you know you had a proper English childhood is that there were frost on the inside of your windows and the rolling blackouts of the 70s were good.
They were character build. They were bad. Like they were bad if you need to vote for a left wing government, but they were good if you need to like fucking bollock your children for complaining that like this fucking they don't want spiders for tea again. Also, like put like frost on the inside of the window.
Georg making his head, rearing his head again.
Yeah, frost on the inside of the windows and putting extra jumpers on is like what you did in the 70s. Just if you were in the north, if you were down south, you just put on an extra house.
However, just to make sure, and this was all, if you remember, this was all presented as a windfall tax on the big energy companies, much the same as Labour was.
Is it not, though?
It is, but what if the left hand has gotten too strong, so Sunak has ensured that the right hand comes into balance.
No.
Is Hitler going to do some basement murders again? Is that what we're hearing here?
No, Sunak instead is offering
Rob's
at the same time.
Lenin for David again.
No, Sunak is at the same time offering all the energy companies $8 billion worth of exploration and investment energy tax breaks. So for every quid invested in new oil and gas fields in the North Sea, they can get 91p back. So essentially, this whole windfall tax is just balanced out by them giving the energy companies a tax break on the other hand.
Yeah, you've got to, you know what I mean? You've got to keep the books balanced because household credit card of national finance and all that shit.
Yes. I mean, if you think about it, this is just the anti-carbon credit. This is the carbon debit, which ensures a balanced household budget for the country.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. By the way, if they want to do gas exploration, Nick, you should come check out that cave in the village. You know what I mean? Maybe that's still there. Maybe that's still going.
There's also,
by the way, yeah, make sure that you walk to work and stuff like that, because that's definitely going to fucking offset this.
Yeah.
And if you're cold on the walk to work, just put on a second car.
One for each foot.
But yeah, by the way, this includes a 300 million barrel new field off the coast of Shetland, owned by a Norwegian company, because apparently our tax breaks also apply to Norwegian companies. So don't worry about it. The Norwegians will be warmer than you this winter.
Oh, that's fucking great. More barrels of oil being extracted. Bad in and of itself, but when doing that stupid thing again where we decide to let other countries just take all of the plus side of ruining the entire ecosystem and atmosphere by giving all that money to the sovereign wealth fund of Norway. Fantastic.
Yeah, well, you see, the trick, the one weird trick there is that, fucking, do you know what I mean? Norwegian companies can bribe our, fucking politicians, whereas the British government already pays our politicians, and so therefore can't bribe them.
Yeah.
So there's no percentage in giving stuff to the British government. It has to go to private companies.
Also, you're just not factoring in that actually, when you think about it, it's really a lot of work to fuck our own wives.
Yeah. The thing is, though, it's that whole thing where, when we discovered oil in the 80s, we, you know what I mean, immediately, privatized it all, whereas when Norway, discovered oil in the 80s, they immediately, fucking, you know what I mean, nationalized the shit out of it and spent all the profits on rinsing us.
Which, to be fair, that's probably... That's the best investment you could ever make.
Oh, yeah, we had it fucking coming.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, well... Concerns over all the payments and that. How about Labour's take on all of this?
Oh, I don't give a fuck.
Labour won the battle of ideas, David. I think you'll find out.
They did, and now they don't like the ideas.
Boy, howdy, I can't wait to hear what great and creative solution Labour have come up with. That's what gets me up every day.
Is it Toryism?
How did you fucking guess? How could you possibly have guessed? There was an article in The Guardian.
I don't know. I don't know why Keir Starmer keeps showing up for work. He just looks like he'd be happier licking a battery at home. Do you know what I
mean? Well, I mean, so would all of us.
Yeah.
I think there's probably a notable decline in my mental health since I got past the age where I used 9-volt batteries for things. Do you know what I mean?
Chiefly for shocking yourself in the head.
Yeah.
Electroshock therapy confirmed working.
Everything you use as an adult runs on double or triple A's, which are just bullshit batteries, quite frankly. Do you know what I mean?
That's true.
Is this another one of Jamie's beefs of societal progress?
Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Being an adult should involve using more giant robots that run on a square battery, quite frankly. The world would be a better place.
Exactly. This weekend, this winter, take the strain off NHS mental health care by just licking batteries in your cold home.
Yeah. So there was an article in The Guardian titled "Labour urges spending watchdog to assess the impact of the Chancellor's £21 billion package."
Oh, of course.
Shadow Treasury Secretary asks Office for Budget Responsibility to examine Rishi Sunak's emergency cost of living measures.
Office for briefcase shagging, more like. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That is incredible. Just like, the Tories are doing something that is very, very slightly to the left of what we've offered. Best call not even the manager, just like telling the teacher that
best
that another boy is making a mess.
Best call spreadsheet squad is going to kick down your door and take you with it.
It's the whole thing. Like, I've heard of this thing where we're going to form an exploratory committee to do good thing, right, or to do a thing, or to solve problem, right. I've heard of that, but this isn't even that. This is forming an exploratory committee to do your opposition for you. Is literally what this is.
Yeah,
it's remarkable. Utterly remarkable.
I should say
all the focus groups were busy with street parties at the weekend. What else were they going to do?
I mean, I should stress though that this watchdog I don't think is the same as the National Audit Office, who I stand unreservedly.
No, it's not. It's not. That's a completely different thing. The Office for Budget Responsibility is very fucking stupid and is basically there to ensure that the national credit card myth lives on forever.
Yeah.
So, from the article, Labour has called for an independent assessment of whether Rishi Sunak's $21 billion cost of living emergency package could cause inflation to rise even higher and a verdict on the fiscal impact of substantial borrowing.
Heaven's fucking sake.
Nobody fall for this bullshit, right? The economy isn't real. Do you know what I mean? Whenever they go, inflation's getting to, it's like, well, I don't give a fuck. Do you know what I mean? That's something for like rich people to worry about.
Listen, even fucking numbers aren't real. Mathematicians will specify when numbers are real, and no one ever specifies the numbers in front of the money sign real. So, who can say? Pat McFadden.
You see economists going on, we need to get wages down because inflation's rising. It's like, how about you go fuck yourself?
It's just this child in a chemistry set, and they just pour different things into different beakers and hoping it all levels out.
Yeah, I mean, I ask of you, what is the point of the economy if people can't afford to live in it? Right? Like,
it's not for them.
You just put it on a shelf somewhere and have guests marvel at your pristine, like perfectly spherical economy. Do you know what I mean? And also, as a point of order, David, like what kind of kid mixes everything in a chemistry set together in the hope that it'll level out? Do you know what I mean? You're trying to make shit explode. Like,
it's the briefcase wanker kid. That's who.
Yeah.
See, I had a chemistry set when I was
aspires to work in the Office of Budget Responsibility.
I had a chemistry set when I was about 10.
C4 or something, because that's how these stories always fucking end.
Yeah, well, we mixed everything together to try and get it to explode, and when it didn't, it just formed like a really dark, like depressing liquid. We poured it down the toilet and stained the toilet black.
Not quite as high octane as I was anticipating.
And then tried to sort of like, you know what I mean, pretend that the toilet suddenly changing colour had nothing to do with the fact that all of the fucking bottles in the chemistry set were empty at once. I haven't seen you using your chemistry set since the incident. It's like, we just got bored of it.
Right, back to this article. So Pat McFadden, who those who won't know, which is all of you, is the Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, said although the sums were of the order of magnitude that would normally be announced within a budget, the UK's tax and spend watchdog.
You'd expect.
Yeah, the UK's tax and spend watchdog. The UK's tax and spend watchdog should provide authoritative and independent economic and fiscal projections.
I'm sorry, but authoritative isn't a word.
Also, Pat, I don't know if you looked at like any fucking economic projection that goes more than like a year forward, and all the lines are always wrong. It's just statistically true that whatever these morons come up with is just horseshit that will allow you to do what you want or not allow you to do what you want. It's
Rob,
it's
you're
a
misunderstanding
nonsense.
Because they're factoring in the fact that eventually a wizard is going to come and fix it.
That's true. I did not account for wizards. That's
no. They will be ours one weakness.
If anyone ever says to you like the word authoritative, what that means, it's secret code for the fact that they can get an entire briefcase up themselves sideways.
With at least £10 billion of new borrowing announced yesterday, there should have been an accompanying report on the fiscal impact of the measures taken by the Chancellor, McFadden said. It is right that families get the support they need, and also right that the country knows how the Chancellor is paying for this.
Mr. McFadden, what the fuck are your priorities here? Do you want to, like, level out this imaginary credit card, or do you just want to, make burbling noises about economy?
Do you know what it is? They should sell an ebook of this cunt for, like, men who get problematic erections on the bus.
He goes on to say that Labour's fiscal rules would ensure that the OBR had oversight of any package that Labour introduced in response to a crisis such as this, ensuring that we get the best value for the public purse. And this is why we have written to them to seek their assessment.
This is the most annoying thing that anyone has ever said.
Yeah.
Like, it's not. This is where like the priority should be this or that. This needs to abide by rules. That's it. Like, there's no like actual end goal in terms of like policy. It's just money should be going to these people, but we've got to make sure it's not too much.
Also, the Tories shouldn't be allowed to copy our homework.
Who does that fucking whose spirit does that fire up? Say, yeah, that's a pie I want to vote for.
See what it is. If they want value for money, right? They should like pay someone to invent the Penrose steps so I can kick this fucker down them.
They're just really pissed off that the Tories did the thing they were saying, but they did more, and like that's irresponsible. You can't possibly want to do more than us, and it's pathetic fucking baby politics for dickheads and Labour Party. So. Yeah, Annalise Dodds mentioning on the
fucking who?
Yeah, the former Shadow Chancellor who's replaced by Reeves.
Who was also, we read her speech, she was also very excited about the Office of Budget Responsibility, by the way.
I mean, for fuck's sake, being excited about the Office of Budget Responsibility makes me want to stick my head down a fucking toilet.
Well, she said Labour called for a windfall tax on oil and gas companies 137 days, 12 hours and 40 minutes before the Chancellor's statement. That's how long it took
your ideas were worse. I don't want to,
further than you. They took your idea and went, what if we cracked this up?
No. Please do let me finish this. That's how long it took him, no one referenced there at all, to even start listening to the millions of people facing soaring bills. Labour is winning the battle of ideas in Britain. Remember what they did to the last guy that won the battle of ideas?
This is the absolute closest a Labour briefcase wanker comes to understanding the offside rule. I'm convinced of it. Right.
The battle of ideas in Britain that I win in my theoretical Spitfire.
This is very much like briefcases at dawn hour. This is fucking terrible.
We will fight them on the spreadsheets.
They're trying to do that Hitman homing briefcase thing, but it just clatters at their feet and they kind of shuffle and look embarrassed.
Oh man, that's like an A tier fucking game bug, honestly.
So that's almost all from Parliament. The other thing to mention is the vote of no confidence that spectacularly failed.
Bored. But
snooze. Think of all the wetted fucking nappies. Think of all the wetted lib nappies.
My fucking mind.
It's important to recognise two things at the same time as a mark of intelligence, On one hand, Boris Johnson is finished. On the other hand, this is the best possible result for Labour, him staying on. Both of these things are true at the same time.
Yeah. Well, why not? Yeah.
Sure.
Welcome
to the Emma Kennedy podcast.
Exactly. That was Owen Jones, for anyone who's wondering, by the way. Just massive levels of cope.
Yeah, Owen Jones, Ash Sarkar, they were all fucking performing the old big cope. I don't really care about the fucking...
I mean, whatever happens,
everything's fucking shit.
They're still in fucking power. Either way.
It's just going to be a different dickhead with a different set of dickhead priorities.
Or the same dickhead with the same fucking priorities.
Yeah. Some people will potentially be persecuted slightly less. Many more will be prosecuted much fucking more. Persecuted. Everything's fucked anyway. It doesn't matter. No change is possible within the system. It's all fucking wank. But with certain specific individuals losing their fucking mind, Ian Dunt was having a very fucking normal one yesterday. That was fun.
I mean, it's because they're treating it like fucking House of Cards, isn't it? It's this character has done this thing, this episode, whatever. How is he gonna scramble his way out of this one. Where it's actually we have to live in the real world where people are still being deported to fucking Rwanda. Like, even if this is like the incipient moment of the collapse of the Tory party to enable like a Labour government, they have still not said that they would stop trying to deport people to Rwanda.
Yeah, I mean, and they wouldn't too. I mean, this is just the court gossips doing their thing.
You know what we need? What we need is that island from Brave New World, right? And we can all go and live on that, and they can and the fucking Labour and the Tories can just get like Aaron Sorkin in to write politics for them, and then they'll all live happily ever after.
Oh my god! You know what? That feels like the kind of thing that these freaks would want is for like Aaron Sorkin to be writing their fucking speeches for them.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. Like
9:01 p.m. Ian Dunt. Oh shit. 9:02 p.m. Johnson survives, but by 211 to 148 votes. 9:02 p.m. He's fucked. 9:03 p.m. Remember that table banging the next time someone suggests to you that the table banging at these things means shit. 9:05 p.m. 2 glasses of wine on a sad-looking table.
Oh yes,
9:17 p.m. Fucking hell. Starmer's had his Weetabix.
Oh,
there's a thing that people say in the 21st century. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I suppose Starmer being like animated is reminiscent of a person with dementia, like being able to stand up and remember things for the first time in years.
Yeah, it's just fucking like, and even then, he's been animated before, and all it does is it's just fucking loud squeaking noises. Like, who cares? It's pointless. It's worthless. It's never achieved anything.
I think actually, David, I think the Stuart Little film made quite a lot of money. So.
Oh, tragic. Yeah, so it's just been a fucking shit show. The Libs are all really fucking mad, but they're all really certain that Johnson must go now because, according to precedent, which is, as we all know, is a thing that is constantly maintained in the year of our Lord 2022. Theresa May got 63% of the party saying confidence. Margaret Thatcher got 55%. And both of them had to walk. And Johnson got 59%. So he also has to walk.
Yeah.
This is a normal thing to assume.
I mean, of course.
Yeah, but what happens when he just shrugs and goes, nah?
Yeah.
Has anyone in the fucking like in the like centrist dipshit cloud even like begun to address that? Because it's happened about 80 times by my reckoning, and you'd think they would start to cotton on that it might be a possibility.
No, they just wake up perfectly smooth-brained every morning and just assume that it'll work today. It's incredible behaviour.
Getting ready for work, putting your entire skull into the Shino Bolo.
Yeah, they're literally like if Guy Pearce and Memento had a subscription to fucking EU Supergirl's Patreon. Do you know what I mean? It's like.
Oh dear. Yeah. So anyway, that's the Parliament bullshit. Who fucking cares? It's all the same wank. It doesn't matter.
Can I interject here with something incredibly cursed that's just happened in real time?
Oh, go for it. Yeah.
So my partner Alex, who does some of the editing on the podcast, has sent me a message. Alex works in IT. I won't specify the company, but I must stress that the field she works in has nothing to do with what I'm about to say. Her message reads as follows. My company has dedicated a chunk of our all-hands meeting to talking about SpaceX, Elon Musk, a high-up person at SpaceX, and what we can learn from them. God help me.
Yeah. Find a new job, Alex.
Yeah.
You'll enjoy it literally more than that, regardless of what the job is.
No, they might be about to present them as a cautionary tale.
Somehow doubt.
Yeah, doubt about that would be fair.
Hope springs eternal.
So moving on to the cops now. And the justice system. Again. Yeah, these cunts again. No, this is about the prosecutions surrounding the Sarah Everard Vigil. So the Met over the weekend begun the prosecution of 4 people for breaking COVID lockdown rules at the vigil for Sarah Everard, who's the woman who was murdered by a rapist piece of shit Met cop, whose colleagues knowingly called him the rapist while he was still serving as a cop. So at that, there was hundreds of people present at that vigil. Literally hundreds. 6 people have now been charged.
Were they the people who offended the police by running into their batons and riot shields at full tilt, as people are wont to do?
Possibly, I don't know. I have very scant details on this, and I'm just going to get into why. But 6 people have now been charged. I said 4. There's 2 more to be charged in the next couple of weeks.
Did they do like super secret prosecutions or some shit?
They did, yes. It's all kind of standard fare, but the prosecutions weren't dealt with in a normal open court. Instead, they were undertaken through what's called the single justice procedure.
Oh, good. I'm glad that there's only one now.
Were they worried that Ethan Hunt had stolen the knock list or some fucking CIA bullshit like that?
I was going to say, is that a Marvel movie?
So basically what this means, but going through the single justice procedure, is that the prosecutions themselves aren't publicly listed. So members of the public, and therefore like court reporters and stuff, who are effectively members of the public to some degree, at least under the way this works, wouldn't have any obvious idea that these cases were actually being conducted or what was on them. If they were published, they would maybe have the people's names on them, but there wouldn't be any information of like what the charge was, what court it was in, anything that you could actually use to identify it beyond like a name, which isn't exactly identifying, depending on the name. The outcomes of the cases themselves don't need to be made public, and in fact, since the cases took place just over the weekend there,
just over the Jubilee weekend, when literally everybody's attention was on Paddington the fucking bear.
Yes. 1 plea has been disclosed by the court out of the 4 cases that were being held.
Fuck.
That's all we know. Yep. So journalists haven't been able to get any access to court documents in the run-up to the hearings, which is something that they've got a right to see. And the Ministry of Justice is either unable or unwilling to provide these documents. They are supposed to only take a day to provide, but the current kind of working time that they're advising is around 7 days, partially because backlogs and partially because full-day bank holiday weekend. And, Jamie, you asked earlier why. Well, the reason that they're given, well, they're not really given a reason, but the reason that these closed courts exist for COVID prosecution specifically was...
Is it because the police are sad, boo-hoo-hoo?
Well, probably, yeah. Initially, these were authorised for COVID prosecutions because, obviously, it was a pandemic and, like, you know, you couldn't have loads of people piling into a courtroom and shit. So they made this kind of separate system where you could easily, conduct a hearing and all the things would be available, etc., etc. It was supposed to be a good enough replacement at the time. But even though every single other part of the government and society in general has decided that COVID isn't real anymore, they are still clinging on to this as a thing to do without any real cause for it. So,
David, are you trying to tell me that the police have taken a tool given to them under powers granted by the government and then used it for malicious purposes?
What I'm saying here is that actually, surprisingly, pretty much every single arm of the state, the ruthless and authoritarian state, hasn't actually taken the piss with this shit and has rode back on it way fucking quicker than they should have, with the only outliers being the Ministry of Justice and the fucking Met, who are desperate to continue using them in this situation.
Yeah, because
obviously it's because
all the other ones annoyed Baz. Do you know what I mean? Who gets hugely angry when he sees someone with a mask on in public.
Yes.
But Baz doesn't give a shit about what happens to criminals because criminals deserve to be fucking killed by the police.
Also, it means that if these cases had to be dropped, then they could be dropped very fucking quietly because as far as the records are concerned, they pretty much didn't actually fucking happen. Yes.
What's really annoying is there's this whole kind of, reactionary, freedom kind of political party conspiracy theory movement in the UK right now. And it's all about how, the pandemic is fake and it's being used to, champ down on our civil liberties, etc., etc. Except all the shit they're annoyed about is just basic pandemic kind of, please maintain 2 meters distance from other people and wear a mask kind of shit.
Yeah, please. We're not even enforcing it anymore, just please.
Yeah, exactly. And yet the serious stuff, which is actually, here are your civil liberties being eroded. Here's the stuff that actually genuinely fucks up our society. They don't even know about it and wouldn't even care if you pointed it out to them.
No, because they're not the criminals.
Because it's not in the Magna Carta.
Yeah, it's so depressing.
The Magna Carta quite clearly states that you don't have to wear a mask in the chip shop. Fuck off, right? But it doesn't say anything about secret courtrooms. You know what I mean?
Somewhere Ellen and Yana just started crying.
And yeah, they have a fucking obsession with this thing called auditing, whereby they like go around and record people doing things, and if they're not allowed to record them doing things, then that means they've got something to hide. And so, you know, there's this whole new conspiracy trend called auditing, which is basically whip out your mobile phone and try and record people doing shit. And if they say no under any grounds, then, well, there's, you know, clearly they're up to no good. It's like, man, I've had to learn far too much about these guys for my work, and I hate this shit.
I think we should bring back happy slapping. I think
that was a good time.
Yeah, it was a happy time.
Yeah.
And it definitely slapped.
Hey.
But no, that auditing thing is wild. Like, did you see the video of those fucking clowns like serving a fucking legal document to Alan Shearer?
Oh yeah,
but they were at someone else's house.
Incredible.
Well, if you see him, hand him this.
But yeah, but speaking of audits,
tell him it's Borger time.
Before we move on to the main topic, I did want to briefly touch on some news from the world of video gaming, and particularly Blizzard's fine new release, Diablo Immortal, which is the fourth or however many installment in the Diablo series.
They called it that because that's how long you have to live if you want to complete the game.
What is great about Diablo Immortal is when they announced it was a BlizzCon, whatever the fuck it was, and everyone's anticipating like the new big Diablo 4 sequel to like Diablo 3, etc. And as soon as they say it's a mobile game, the crowd just goes dead fucking silent.
Oh, my favourite part of that was there was one guy, and like, you know, you can make fun of him all you want, but I still kind of relate. He got up to use the mic for like the quick Q&A session, and he asked him, "Is this an April Fool's joke?" Like, you know, and I'm like, yeah, okay. And then they got really, the developers got really shirty about it and rhetorically asked the audience, "What? Don't you own mobile phones?" Just like normal scenes.
Yeah, but now people have had like an actual hands-on look at the game because it's about to come out, and I think it's got like 30 million pre-orders or something, and it is...
Yeah, but you can only get your hands on it if you have Midas Touch.
How do you pre-order a mobile game?
Fuck knows.
That is what? How do you? How seriously? How does that work? Like, you don't. Do you know what I mean? You don't fucking. It's wild enough that like people have to pre-order fucking like games they're going to download off Steam or fucking whatever or the PlayStation Store. But a fucking mobile game, they beg you to take those things. Why the fuck would you pre-order it?
Jamie, I think you'll find it's very important to pre-order your free-to-play mobile game.
This is specifically what I wanted to talk about because the free-to-play thing isn't quite so free as you might imagine it is. I read a couple of things about it.
I assure you, whatever you're about to say about how the free-to-play works, it is exactly as free as I imagined it would be. So,
so for those of you who don't know, essentially to get armor and weapons and doodads, you can play this game or you can pay. And Blizzard essentially has an incredible level of incentive for you to pay, up to and including essentially completely locking out the top tier of everything unless you pay substantial amounts of money for this game. And just like any good drug dealer, the first samples of this pay-to-play stuff are free, but to get one, you have to log into the store first and thereby link your account to your Apple Pay ID or your Google Pay ID or one of those. And with the free sample, you get some like orbs, which are in one of the many forms of in-game currency, but you don't get enough to buy literally anything in the store. You get like literally half a penny. Essentially,
I love it when businesses just copy the business model of like crack cocaine dealers and heroin dealers.
And when you defeat the first boss in the game in the first act, you get another taster with another bunch of orbs. But even when you put those two together, you don't have enough for the cheapest in-store item, but you have almost enough. So you just need to spend a little bit to get there.
But I bet you can't. I bet you can't just spend a little bit though, because I bet the orbs only come in like £10 packs or something.
Pretty much, yeah. So essentially, you can trade time. You can either grind all this shit out, or you can trade time for real cash money. And if you don't like doing that, the game will be boring as shit and will also pretty much be your full-time job. So the basis is you buy items with things called orbs, and the orbs you buy with real money. That's how there's a step in between you exchanging real money for items, and that makes it abstract more so people, and especially kids, do it more. And then they in turn convert into yet another item. Sorry, the orbs convert into crests, and the crests give you the chance, but not the guarantee, that high-level items could drop in games, but they only give you like a 5% chance. So if you want a good item, you probably have to buy, statistically speaking, you have to buy 20 orbs worth of crests, which rounds out to about 50 quid. If you want one nice item.
Anyone like unconvinced of the evils of J.K. Rowling, the money system she invented for Wizards is basically this shit. Like, it has a 3-tier system for money. Fuck off.
Yeah, also, I mean, this is the equivalent of precision-engineered, very expensive Legos specifically designed not to fit together, so that you keep needing to buy more, so eventually you can get something.
Yeah, we've given you a fucking loot box, but it's just fucking Lego, Duplo, and Mega Blocks. Have fun, prick.
Yeah, but these are specifically the highest level items to get to like the top tier, so you can be the coolest, baddest dude on the server, are physically locked out of the game unless you pay. You can't get them through normal means. Or there's like you would have to grind like thousands and thousands of hours. Statistically, the chance is 0 that you would be able to max out your in-game character if you did spend money. However, even if you did, there's not a guarantee that you do get what you want. So apart from these orbs, there's also more shit.
Was the design spec for this fucking game to make it the most tedious, unfun piece of fucking shit Blizzard like disaster piece ever made? Because holy shit, like none of this sounds like something that I want. Like, as someone who has played like at least Diablos 2 and 3 and like a bunch of other Blizzard games, like this is like by far the worst sounding.
This is the blueprint for every Blizzard game going forward, though. Do you know what I mean? Like nerds were furious when they announced the mobile game instead of Diablo 4, but Diablo 4 is going to be like this. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It won't be maybe won't be quite as extreme because it's not on phones.
Yeah,
but like it'll have some bullshit like this attached to it because the fucking games industry is incapable of not doing that.
Yeah.
Listen, like this all sounds pretty terrible, but you know, Rob, how are NFTs going to fix this?
That's going to come in Diablo 4, I guess. So, like, some people on Reddit did all the data mining and crunched the numbers, and the estimate is that it would take you, if you paid for nothing, you just played the game straight up, it would take you 10 years of playtime to reach the top level and have the best gear. And one of the absolute determinants of you battling against other characters in the game is not the gear, is not your level, which is all publicly attainable. It's specifically through these gems, of which you can only get to the top level without paying. And if you thought that was the only way of paying in the game, it's not. There's other ways you can supercharge essentially the probability of your character progressing and getting good stuff. One of which is the Super Battle Pass, which is 15 quid per season. I don't know how long a season lasts, but that's another 15
minutes.
Quid. Yeah. You can also buy more
until
inventory.
the end of this sentence.
You can also buy more inventory space and access to like a market where you can trade with other characters for another 10 quid a month. But that market doesn't use the orbs that I just mentioned. It uses eternal orbs, so they're not the same. So you have to have both eternal orbs and regular orbs if you want to get anywhere.
It really is fascinating because Path of Exile, which is like essentially, as far as I'm concerned, the true sequel to Diablo 2 because it's actually good, has like probably the most ethical like microtransaction system I've ever seen in a game that is actually is free to play. And Blizzard had looked at that and went, nah, fuck that. We could rinse them for more money and make a worse game. Like, it's just really is impressive to see just how fucking dog shit of a company they are.
The thing is as well, though, right, where you say it would take 10 years to earn everything in game, like, without spending money. I guarantee you that is a fucking, like, a plus to a lot of players. Because there's a thing with a lot of people who, like, for a lot of gamers where they're completely fucking incapable of recognizing that their life sucks And so they rate their entertainment software based purely on how long it takes to complete. Because it's like, do you know what I mean? If you want the example, it's Elite Dangerous, which is one of the most tedious fucking games ever, with nothing to do apart from like grind.
Jamie,
yet,
I don't think that's entirely fair, because it's not just how long things take; it's also being able to lord that shit over peons who don't have as much shit as you.
Well, yeah, but no, I mean, like, a lot of people are just like they're just like, oh no, if you made it easier to get like all the stuff in the game, they would stop playing sooner, and therefore the game would be objectively worse, because the value of a game is in how many hours it takes you to finish it, and nothing else. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if the game's shit. It doesn't matter if the story's terrible. It doesn't matter if you're having fun or not. What's important is that the total number of hours you got for your money, like for the money you spent.
Yeah, Jamie, it's literally the value for money shit we were talking about in the politics section earlier on.
Yeah,
like it's the same drive. It's like you got to have value for money. How do you determine value in fun? Well, you can't really quantify fun. All you can do is quantify attention.
Yeah.
So how much attention?
Well, and also you can quantify one more thing. You can quantify one more thing, which is number. You can quantify number. My number bigger than your number, therefore I'm better.
Well, no, I was going to say the thing is as well, though, it ties into the whole like thing you see gamers talking about with like dead games, where it's like fucking, oh, this game's like not getting any more updates. It's a dead game. Oh, the player numbers have dropped. Remember when there was those fucking articles about how the player numbers had cratered after a month on Elden Ring? And it's like, yeah, I wonder why that is. Do you know what I mean? Everyone's just so like, because everyone like people complain about live service games and how shit they are, but to a lot of gamers, that's the ideal model because it keeps you fucking like distracted from, you know what I mean? The fact that like most of your money goes on rent, and you know what I mean? There's basically like a lot of fucking gamers have like high paying tech jobs and are convinced that the world is just and right because they got a high paying tech job, and so everyone else could just, you know what I mean, learn to code. And the other side of that is
it's the social inclusion thing. Like if a game is live, if it's a live service game, and there's a huge player base and shit like that, it's the happening thing of the now which they are involved in. So it's a social status thing too. Like the whole system's fucked, and live service games have absolutely fucking like been the main contributor to that.
Yeah.
So essentially, just to wrap this up, all in all, a bunch of people did the math on this. If you want the fully maxed out character with the maxed out stats and the best looking armor set, etc., you would need, if the probability distributions are what they are in the game right now, you would need to spend somewhere between $100,000 and $110,000 US. And this is not just to like go in the store and set fire to your credit card. You would also still have to spend like thousands of hours in game to make all the probabilities work, because you're operating on a 5% drop chance. So you would still have to put in, for every one of the thing you want, you would have to put in 20 hours, and you want many things. So it's not just thousands of hours, it's $110,000 US.
Are loot boxes involved in this at any point?
Yes.
Blizzard says they're not, but this game is not being sold in Belgium or Holland, where there are legal restrictions on loot boxes.
Yes.
So in Belgium and Holland, those are considered gambling, and in those two countries, not for sale.
That $110,000, I'd imagine, if loot boxes are involved, that's an average spend.
Yeah.
Because there's probably a possibility that you would drop the $110,000 and not get what you needed.
Oh yeah, I mean that's what I'm saying. What Rob is saying, isn't it? The 5%, just it's 100,000 to, if you took like an average person trying to do it.
No, I mean, yeah, he's saying it's a 5% chance when you grind in game with the item you got from, like, you spent your money on a crest or some shit. Yeah, and then that gives you a 5% drop chance, so you've got to grind the bosses. But I'm saying, are you guaranteed to get the fucking crest, is what I'm asking, or could you drop 20 quid?
It depends if the manager of the Goblin Bank deems you worthy of it.
Yeah, because I'm imagining a scenario where you drop like $1,000 on loot boxes and get no crests.
Yeah, it's possible. Or you don't get, there's like, the crests are divided in, it's something to do with jewels, and there's like 10 types or colors of jewels. So you could get a lot of the correct level of jewel, they would just not be the color you want. So you could just be overstocked in one category.
just love to be the unluckiest whale in the world.
Yeah.
Where you're like, oh boy, honey, I've remortgaged a house so I can slay this dragon. Let's get going. And then you just sit there and blow through the entire mortgage and still don't get the thing you're looking for.
But that's why Whale Song always sounds so fucking miserable. Also, did we all see that fucking Crypto Bros vision of like the future of games?
Yes.
That was great. That I love to fucking
the
grind.
thing I've ever heard.
Grind for 8 hours to unlock like a fucking, you know what I mean, a hat that I can then wear in space or some shit. It's like, yeah, cool. That sounds great, that, mate.
Yeah, it should be hundreds of hours to grind for a hat that you can wear in your vampire castle, right, Jamie?
Yeah.
Right. Well, let's maybe fucking fold this cunt and go on to the main topic, shall we?
Yeah, let's.
Also, conveniently, that's fucking 8 o'clock. So,
yeah,
Jamie, if you need to piss off,
that's my cue to bounce. So, have fun with whatever the rest of the pod's about.
Hi, welcome back. Jamie has had to fuck off for reasons.
He had to return to his home planet.
Yeah, it's not a comment on the content, on the quality of content in the upcoming section anyway. So yeah, we're just gonna get rattled with this without Jamie. So Rob, take us away.
Accident.
So I wanted to talk about, despite what we talked about in the first section, I wanted to talk about debt and the importance of debt, and specifically that of the corporate sector, and why that might be like a gigantic fuck-off problem coming up.
Right. This is us putting on our the economy is real hats now, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is very much
right.
that. Some of this... this is one of those points where...
I don't know about... sorry, but I don't know about you guys, but I put mine on sideways, like, you know...
Yeah, then I sit backwards on a chair.
Yeah, exactly, right? So that's the attitude we're taking to this. We're like, we'll wear the hat if you make us, Rob, but we're not going to wear it your way, okay?
All right, so I wanted to talk about some elements of it, and then I wanted to talk about a specific product that was designed to be a way around these things that rhymes very much with the things that brought down the economy in 2008 and may or may not be in a position to do the same thing all over again. Yeah, but this time they've been renamed into CLOs, which is a completely different thing.
That'll slip right past the regulation, right?
Just looking on my keyboard, what 2 letters are adjacent to each other on the keyboard right in front of me? C... never mind. I'm sure that's not important. Carry on, Rob.
All right. So very, very briefly, I talked way too much about central banking in different episodes already. You can go listen to them. They're called The Curse of Money Island. But very briefly, post-2008 and even more during COVID, the central banks lowered the interest rate to 0 to even lower and started up buying up huge pools of state debt, which means that all the money that like pension funds and banks and wealthy people and everybody that wants to invest money needs to find a safe place to put their money, and they need to find it somewhere further out on what is known as the yield curve, which is it brings in a bit more money, but there's a little bit more risk. And wherever you find that point, essentially the central banks took away the safest option on the table. The idea being, if we get all that money to not be invested in the state, but rather in corporations and in the private sector, then they will create all the jobs, and that will save the economy post-2008 and then keep the economy alive during COVID. So
is the yield curve Rob? Just the bell curve, but for stonks? Like, is that what this is?
Yes.
I was going to say that whole spiel you just gave us, Rob, that felt like it needed an "I assume" at the end.
Yeah. Well, I mean, broadly speaking, this is what happened. Like, a lot of money that would previously have gone into just buying US 10-year treasuries or UK gilts or German obligations did go out because and seek investment in the corporate sector because there was literally no safe state debt to buy. Like, it did what it was supposed to do in a way. So a huge amount of money sloshes into the corporate world. And the question is then, of course, is how does that money get spent? Because it's all in the form of loans in different stripes, right? a pension fund isn't giving 10 billion to Boeing or BASF or whatever big corporation you can think of out of the goodness of their heart. They want it because they want their money back plus some interest. So what did those corporations then spend their money on? Well, some of them, but not a lot of them, did actually buy new plants, new materials, hired new workers, and did the productive stuff that makes the material economy go brr. More of them, though, did other things. The first thing being corporate stock buybacks. We talked about this a little bit in previous episodes. Essentially, what a lot of them did is they borrowed a shit ton of money from the open markets and then bought their own stocks back with it, which boosted the price of their own stock without having to materially change anything about the company. It's just an accounting trick, but it does work very well. Since the 2009 and the advent of free money from the central banks, that percentage jumped from about 6% a year to about 12% a year being spent on just stock buybacks. And in terms of volume, according to CNBC, since the start of COVID, so that's 2019 to now, so that's excluding all the stuff before, that was already 1.5 trillion that was just spent in buying own company stocks, thereby juicing the share price, which if you're an executive and you have options, that pays you out and it makes the shareholders happy and it makes your company look good, even though it doesn't do anything functionally but just put more debt on your balance sheet.
Yeah, should we, I've been thinking this for a while, let's just do a little detour here, Rob, just for the benefit of our audience, right? Because I don't think many people realize this, but when a company offers its shares, right, basically the initial public offering, they put out a bunch of shares and say, hey, you can buy these, and then the market decides, in theory, what the value of these shares are on a per unit price, and then people buy them up. And in that initial public offering, the money then goes to the company. After that, the shares are basically traded between collectors, for want of a better word. And in theory, having shares entitles you to a portion of the proceeds of profit from the company, which gets paid out as dividends, in theory. In practice, many companies, like Amazon, don't pay dividends. And so the only value of these is essentially as I guess the only way to describe it is as rare collectible cards. You know, they don't actually do anything in of themselves, but owning the shiny it has a value associated with it nominally. Yeah. And if you have enough of them, maybe you can vote for part of the board or something like that. I think I've
heard of these before. It's something to do with apes, right?
And it's but it's a gamble as well. It's essentially, as you say, you're completely correct. Amazon has never paid dividends, probably never will. Facebook the same. All the big tech darlings, none of them ever pay dividends. Uber will definitely not do it. What you're doing is you're buying it on the assumption that the next guy coming behind you will pay you more for it. Now, that kind of economy has a certain shape to it, which you can draw very easily with three sides.
And also, as Rob says, like what they're doing in this scenario is they're essentially going, okay, we, the company, will buy back and destroy a bunch of these ultra rare cards which are circulating, which will increase the rarity and therefore value of the remainder.
Oh, no. No, James. That's how it would normally go. But in this scenario, what they did is they bought a big volume of shares on the open market, thus improving the value of the shares. And then a little while later, they would do another share emission a couple months later to approximately the same size and value, thus sort of lowering the value a little bit. But that would allow, so essentially the pool of shares would remain the same. They would just juice it once in a while by buying a chunk of it. So,
oh my God, right. So hang on. So they were, let me get this straight. They're like, okay, we'll buy back 10% of the shares, let's say. Okay, cool. We're just going to stick them in our pocket. Now the remaining 90% of their value has gone up. We'll wait a couple of months. Now we're going to issue that 10% again. But at this point, the market psychology has gone, well, the value of this share went up, and now there's going to be more of them.
Therefore, we'll buy them at the elevated price. Yes.
Oh my God. This is the sanest system under which to distribute resources and value.
This is just like a side item of the stuff I wanted to get into.
Oh God!
Yeah, this is genuinely shit, man.
I had no idea, Rob. I did not know they did that. That's ridiculous. I'd like, oh fuck me. Okay, this is going really dark places tonight.
The other thing they did. I mean, there was a bunch of shit that happened, but among the other things that happened at huge volumes, way bigger than happened before the advent of zero interest rates and free central banking money, essentially, is that venture capital companies grew huge and went on massive buying sprees. You think like BlackRock, the Carlyle Group, a whole bunch of companies with gigantic pools of money, and what they do essentially is they put some of their own money into, like, I'll give you a real world example. This is the best way I can explain it. This genuinely happened last year, and it concerns Britain's fourth largest supermarket, Morrison's.
Good.
Yeah. It's been around since 1899, and in last year as well. Asda, by the way, was also sold to another private equity group under a similar deal. And last year, Morrison's was the subject of a strong debt-fueled bidding by a few different private equity groups, including an eventually losing bid from a group owned by SoftBank. For more on that, listen to Trash Future. But it was eventually sold to a private equity group called Clayton, Dubilier and Rice, or CDR, for just a hair short of £10 billion. I think 9.9 or 9.8 billion pounds. So how does CDR do that? Well, they say, we'll put in, let's say, about 10% of our own money. We'll go out on the market and we'll borrow another 90%, so let's say 9 billion, and with that money together, we will buy Morrison's, and because we are private equity and we are efficient, we will make Morrison's so much more efficient that it will not only be able to pay off this debt that we will load on the balance sheet of Morrison's, and we don't keep on ours because that's something you're allowed to do, and then we will make it so much more efficient that either we sell it on to the next buyer who will pay more for it, or we'll list it again on the open market, and then shareholders will see so much value that everybody gets their money back.
So they borrow all that money and then they just juice the thing that they've purchased to end up paying off all of that.
Yeah, either that to pay it off or to sell it on to the next private equity company for a little bit more, so everybody gets their money back.
For fuck's sake.
I mean, like we know what form these efficiencies take. It's sacking people, worsening conditions, stripping assets, etc. Until it goes bust. That was what happened to Toys R Us, wasn't it?
Yes.
I've just realised in the past year, Morrison's, who like normally I would shop with Morrison's or Aldi depending on what I particularly need. Morrison's have discontinued a whole bunch of really good like Morrison's own store lines that I used to like get and enjoy, and now it just all makes perfect sense.
And the reason that
the specific thing that comes to mind for me is the breaded chicken. They've changed like the breaded chicken steaks and all that shit. That's all fucking new. There's like 50% the amount of fucking chicken now in them. It's bullshit. It's so bad compared to what it used to be.
If you hate it so much, David, why don't you move to Venezuela?
I don't know the specifics of that product, but there could well be a link between the efficiency of the private equity group CDR and the destruction of chicken in your product, because Morrison's is a really good example of why it was bought at such a extremely high premium. It was, before this acquisition, relatively low in debt. And it also had a very high level, way higher than other UK supermarkets, of what is known as vertical integration, by which I mean they own a lot of the land on which the supermarkets sit, and they also as well own a lot of farmland. So like about 50% of Morrison's stuff was like sourced from their own farms. So they had their own...
There's your assets. There's your assets that can go in the bin.
Exactly, and those can be assets stripped out of the company. So very roughly speaking, as we've been discussing, what happens in actual productive company like Morrison's, which was not in a great financial shape, but it was also not doing too badly, gets acquired by private equity with a lot of borrowed money, which leads to a lot of people being fired in the name of efficiency, because if you drop labor costs, your earnings look a lot better, and you strip the assets out. So you sell the farmland, you... and for example, this comes from the Financial Times. The most obvious Morrison the most obvious thing to do with Morrison is to revisit its high level of property ownership. Many believe that Fortress, one of the investment companies, will release cash from Morrison's extensive real estate, even though it has ruled out any material store sale and leasebacks. So what will normally happen is, in case of Morrison, they say we've ruled it out, but we don't have to trust them, is what you can do is you can split off the property, so all the land and the buildings underlying the actual Morrison supermarket, and then lease those stores back to the actual company. So the new company just has all the actual valuable material assets, and you just make the old company pay for the thing that used to be theirs. That's a very, very familiar private equity trick. Mind you, by the way, you can do this with Morrison. So CDR can sell Morrisons to the Carlyle Group or whoever the guys were who bought Asda. You can do this trick endlessly and just load more and more and more and more debt on the Morrison's balance sheet, as long as that debt can be serviced. So as long as the interest payments can be made on the debt, not the repayment, mind you, but the interest payments can be made, you can do this shit endlessly. And this is a process that's been going on in America, but increasingly in the UK for a really long time now, where private equity buys something with borrowed money, loads that borrowed money on the balance sheet of the company, and then sells it on to another company, which loads it with more debt, and then sells it on for a higher price by selling the land and stripping the assets and firing the workers, and then selling it on to the next company. Now, that's, of course, something that can only work if the interest rates remain near enough to zero or very low. So there's just enough actual profit being turned through that you can repay the interest. Because, interestingly...
well done.
Don't reward him for that.
And this briefly is where we have to do a brief interlude and explain how corporate debt works in general, right? I say briefly, but it's like a page worth of notes.
Yeah, briefly Rob's terms.
Yes, exactly. So make yourself a cup of tea.
It's only 2 pages of the show notes.
Yeah. So this is like a brief primer on how corporate debt works in general. A company wants to do thing. They want to do actual productive things like buy a new factory, hire more staff, or they want to do non-productive but profitable spreadsheet magic shit like stock buybacks. They don't have the money on hand, or they do have the money on hand, but they want to roll the dice and think it's cheaper to borrow some and repay it later, because when we make more money, we can repay better later. Very, very broadly speaking, there are 2 types of corporate debt. There's commercial paper, which is very short term and essentially says you have to pay the whole debt back within 90 days. So that's the principal plus whatever interest is set on it. And the other thing is bonds, which is corporate bonds, which is what we're mainly talking about. That's anything longer than 90 days. You buy it, you get regular interest payments at whatever the interest is set at the moment. And whenever the bond runs to the end of its life cycle, which is anything from 10 to 20 or 30 years or anything in between, you get not just at the end of the life cycle, but only at the very end of it do you get the principal back. So if the bond is worth $1 million, you don't get anything during the time you're holding it except the interest payments. It's only at the very end that you get your $1 million back, if you see what I mean.
Right.
So far, so good?
Yep.
Yeah.
Both of these instruments, so commercial paper and corporate bonds, have been around since forever. They're fairly well regulated. They're very standardized. Nothing new, nothing surprising. But the critical thing here that you need to remember, that very much unlike a mortgage, there is no repayment of the principal sum until the maturity date. Like if you have a mortgage, you repay a little bit of the principal every month until the mortgage is paid off and you own your house. So you dissolve it over time. Corporate debt does specifically not do that. So normally what you'd expect a corporation to do is, over the lifetime of a bond, it would store up an amount of chunk of change that when it matures, they have the cash on hand to pay you out, to repay you in full. However, very often, indeed most often, that does not happen. What instead happens is what's called a rollover or a refinancing of the debt. So Praxis Cast Limited has like $1 million outstanding in bonds, and it's held by, I don't know, Barclays Bank. Let's say Barclays. And instead of having to have $1 million on hand at the end of the thing, we go to Barclays towards the end of it and say, look, we've been good payers. You've gotten your interest payments over the lifetime of the bond. What about, instead of us paying you back and we're done, we roll it over, we let the same terms stand, or we adjust the interest rates a little bit because of the where the new levels are, and then you can keep getting your interest payments, which is the profit, which is what you really want. You don't want the $1 million back, you want the money that the $1 million is making. So what do you say? We Praxis Class Limited keep paying you interest, and you don't need the actual money back. So that's called rolling over the debt or refinancing the debt. There's subtle differences, but I won't bore you with it. And you can do it with the same people that hold your bonds now, or you can shop around and see if there's another pool of money that's interested in taking over your bond. So instead of going back to Barclays, we go to RBS or NatWest or whoever the fuck would be interested. But, of course, there is a risk, and that's the critical bit that you also have to remember for later, is that you can't roll it over. Maybe Praxis Cast Limited turns out to be hot dog shit and doesn't actually make any money.
Oh, that's what I'm hearing.
Maybe the new interest rates are...
Do you like to funnel hot dog shit?
Maybe the
new... have the podcast company for you.
just suddenly struck by this whole idea that you've got like this guy sitting in the office quantifying the runniness of hot dog shit to determine whether it's worth refinancing at the end of the bond period.
Maybe there's been a spike in interest rates, so literally even if we could roll it over, we don't make enough money to repay the interest, so there's a problem. Maybe we just can't get anybody to be interested to roll over our debt, so it's not a guarantee. Like, there's a very high probability that you can, but it's not guaranteed. That's quite important. And this is also where a huge amount of finance wizards make their money, because every time you refinance a bond, you need a new contract that has new conditions. Maybe you need some new borrowers, so maybe you need to go to an investment bank to put the whole thing together for you. Like Goldman Sachs will look for a big enough pool of money, maybe with several different investors, to take your bond over.
Okay. Rob, can I do a bit of a Cassandra here and predict the future based on what you've said so far? Would I be hot or cold in terms of like how close I am if I were to say that there's a huge problem potentially coming because the increase in interest rates brought about by the rise in inflation might mean that a bunch of companies are unable to service their debt obligations, which isn't immediately a problem, but does become a massive problem the second they do refinancing, and then suddenly no one wants to refinance because it's too volatile a market. Does that sound right?
That is about exactly right, but wait until you figure out how we figured out to pour gasoline all over this little problem.
Oh, wow, I'm loving this. This is like unfolding catastrophe. It's shit, look at that. The piano's collapsed. Well, you ain't seen nothing yet, because as it collapsed, it hit the shelving. Oh, well, that's pretty bad. But the bowling ball at the end of the shelving is, loving this. This is fantastic.
Exactly. So it's that scene in 2012 where the earthquake begins, and then they drive away, and then the waterway starts to fall apart, and then they get in a plane, and then they start to fly away, and then the buildings start falling down around them, and then they get through all the buildings, and there's a massive tidal wave. And it's fine. Like, there's more movie after this somehow. It's good, I promise.
Yeah. So this is, like, the stuff we've been talking about so far is mainly to do with straightforward corporate bonds. American Airlines, Boeing, whoever, they need some money, they go out and get the money, and then they roll it over if they can make the thing work or not, as James was very accurately predicting just now. Where it becomes much more interesting is if you do this thing that I was just talking about with Morrisons. So if you're CDR, you buy Morrisons at a big premium, you put in a small amount of money, that you put in a small amount of your own money, you borrow a lot more, and that's usually how much you borrow is usually determined by what's known as the leverage ratio. Leverage being however much does the company, Morrisons in this case, make in a given year, and what is the multiple of that we can borrow. So let's say Morrisons, I don't know, makes £1 billion a year in clean profit. The leverage ratio on average for US companies is about 6. So if it makes $1 billion, you can borrow about 6 against the company. But given how low the interest rates have been, it's not been totally uncommon that it's gone up to like a 10 a factor of 10. So if Morrison's makes 1 billion, you can borrow 10 billion. And again, you can stack that. So if CDR sold it to...
I find the idea of like Morrison's of all places making a clean £1 billion in profit a year very perplexing almost.
I don't know if they do. I'm just using round numbers to make the math easier.
Well, I mean, but in the context of whoever the fuck CDR or whatever borrowing like £9 billion to buy Morrison's, that would imply that Morrison's do in fact make £1 billion of profit a year, which is, like I say, mind-blowing and perplexing.
I just looked this up for your benefit, Alistair. What do you think Morrison's annual turnover is?
Oh, I've got no idea. £400, I don't know.
It's 17.6 billion.
Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah.
Damn.
That is pretty huge.
I should start a supermarket chain.
Yeah, so essentially... there's this huge amount of money that CDR has borrowed to buy Morrison's, right? The 9 billion. And 9 billion is a huge chunk of money, and it's very difficult to find like one bank or one investment firm or one pension fund that wants to front you the whole 9 billion, right? Because that's a lot of risk you're taking on, assuming that CDR can, clean out Morrison's enough to turn the money around, that they're good enough, or that somebody else will buy it before there's a real problem coming down the pipeline. So what normally happens is CDR will go to a big investment firm. In this specific case, I think it's Credit Suisse or Goldman Sachs or something, and they will find a group of investment firms that pool the money together to get you to the 9 billion. So how do you make that pool? Well, you make that pool through what is known as a collateralized loan obligation. And if you think that sounds oddly familiar...
There's the magic words.
That's what we started with, because the thing that blew up the US housing market was collateralized debt obligations, where they took like a giant pool of mortgages from all over the US and said, this is safe, and then split it off into different elements, paying different returns, but it was all mostly guaranteed to be safe because it was financial wizards. So the rating companies said this is safe. So instead of doing that with mortgages, we're doing the same thing again, but with corporate loans.
Cool.
Yeah. So there's a guy. I think it's, I can't remember. This is
one
about
Australian man who signed off all of these loans.
It's an American Credit Suisse called John Pop, who asked the same question. What can
in relation to corn pop?
What can investors do in the age of 0% interest, but they need to make money? Like pension funds need to make money to pay out the pensions that they have promised to their customers. But the state is out of the game, and they're not making enough money because of the central bank action where we started. But the investors, again, like pension funds, need the money to be safe enough to satisfy themselves and the regulators that they're not invested in weird Ponzi shit, but in actual responsible corporations. So the financial sector invents this toy, or reinvents it, that they knew very well from pre-2008. This is the CDO. And they just redid it as the collateralized loan obligation, which then they crammed full of these leveraged corporate loans, the 9 billion that they loaned to buy Morrison's, rather than the straightforward, boring corporate bonds that we were talking about before, which already might be hurtling off the cliff. Why would you buy them? Well, because the interest rate on them is slightly higher than you would get from a straightforward corporate bond. And if you just buy enough of them, then the multiplier is high enough and you can make real money.
I'd love to collapse the economy over a marginal interest rate of like 0.001% in my investment.
Exactly. But I mean, this is
excellent.
This is partly by design of the central banks. This is where we started. This is what it was meant to do. It was meant to get giant pools like pension.
I'm a machine that fucks economies, and you can't stop me.
Well, it was meant to get these giant pools of like pension funds, big banks, that kind of stuff, out of state debt where it did nothing productive, quote unquote, and put it into the hands of the private sector, which would do jobs and that kind of stuff. Like make Morrison's more efficient by firing everybody. So these CLO instruments become increasingly popular after the yield rates really start to fall after 2010, when all the central banks put the interest rate at zero. Just to give you an indication of about where it's at, the total value of the CLO market in the US alone last year was $431 billion when you factor in everything. So let's see.
Do you know what that is like globally at all?
It's in the over the trillions. It's somewhere north of $1.5 trillion, which, by the way, is bigger than the size of the US, like the combined US mortgage packaging and repackaging sector when it exploded in 2008. It's bigger than that now.
So I assume it's just too big to fail then.
It is, but there's one crucial difference essentially between a CDO, which is the housing mortgage stuff that blew up in 2008, and the CLO, which is the thing we're talking about now, is that a mortgage debt is not that hard to understand. It's pretty straightforward. People just lied a lot and it was filled with horseshit, but it's pretty easy to understand. You take a big pool of mortgages, you cram everything together, you say if you want the riskier stuff, you get more money out of it. If you want the safer stuff, you get less money out of it, but it's fairly straightforward. But corporate debt agreements, like these CLOs, are incredibly complex documents. They're like 350, 400-page contracts, and they're subject to like a billion little subclauses. But these CLOs, when they're rated by security instruments, saying, well, they're pretty safe and a pension fund can buy them. So what happened is, over time, because there was so much money sloshing around and it needed to make better returns, is that there's not a lot of people who put together these CLOs. They're quite specialized. It's like a couple of investment banks that are really good at it. And they figured out over time that they held the whip hand because they had a rare product. So what these investment groups, CDR, private equity, started to do, CDR, BlackRock, Carlyle...
A businessman steps out of an alleyway and opens up his blazer to you and says, look, check out these rare investment opportunities that I've got for you.
Well,
they're completely legal and probably won't collapse the economy.
Well, what they started to do was that, but with a light twist to it. What they said was, now you are addicted to the returns that I can give you. How about we slightly tweak the conditions of the contracts that they're more favorable to me and less to you, the lender? So, for example, what if we put in a clause, if I'm CDR, and I say, what if we put in a clause that says, I'm still allowed to sell all of Morrison's lands and farms, and you're not allowed to object even though you hold like $5 billion of my debt. That's the kind of stuff that started to happen. So now, like, the CLO is no longer as secure as it was because it's no longer backed up by Morrison's land and farms and stuff, because that's all been hived off into that other company and probably already sold off. It's just living on the promise that Morrison's can keep servicing the debt.
And imagine if they'd actually taken all these like hundreds of billions of dollars and actually put them into something that was actually, productive, like infrastructure or something like that. Like if they had just left it with the state to actually do the things that the state is meant to do, then they might have actually gotten some fucking return. Like, can we just upend this entire like socio-political economy shit? Because it's just not working, frankly.
Well, we could have, but unfortunately, people became addicted to collateralized loan obligations, and they will now regret its absence.
Yes, very much.
Soon to regret it. Absence.
Yeah. So there's one more thing that you need to know about these CLOs that makes them quote-unquote safer for investors, and that is essentially they're pretty much always variable interest rate, which means that if the interest rate in general starts to rise, let's say if the central banks decide to raise the interest rates, the interest rate on the CLO rises along with the general trend. It doesn't stay locked in at the 0% you agreed last year when the money was worth 0%. So once again, if the interest rate starts to rise, you get more money out, but what if the underlying asset, i.e. Morrison, says, we can't pay this anymore. We actually don't have enough money going out to service all this huge wad of debt we have. So it makes it safer right up until the point it is no longer safe, if that makes sense.
We really live in stupid economic times, don't we?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
bring back tulips.
I mean, this is the thing. It's all highly effective at doing its real agenda, which is to concentrate wealth in the right hands.
Yeah, I mean, jacking up share prices, which is like the by their own admission, the only useful kind of economic activity that there is, apparently.
So essentially what's happening is there are ever more and more of these leveraged loans out there. 2021 was a banger year, according to Bain & Co. And these leveraged loans are being repackaged and sliced into ever more varied and more wildly out there CLOs, which are held by ever more institutions. And the standards underpinning all these deals are getting shittier and shittier and weighed against the investor all the time. And all of it is essentially relying on an infinity of free central bank money, because that's the only way the circus can stay on the road. Because if you look at the bottom of the pyramid, you're looking at very tiny percentages of return. Like Morrison's just needs to be able to make the interest payment all the time. Remember? They don't need to repay the capital. They just need to be able to roll it over, roll it over, roll it over. And these CLOs just need to be rolled over and rolled over and rolled over. And they can never actually... If the CLO on Morrison's, let's say it's one contract, if it's 9 billion, if it was called in all at once, Morrison's probably couldn't pay it off because it's way too much. It would probably go under, like the lights would literally just go out.
I mean, that's I think something along those lines happened to Toys R Us, as I mentioned earlier, didn't it?
It did.
It was private equity came in, burnt down everything that they could to, maximise the efficiency of the business, and then I don't know the actual specifics of the the corporate loan or whatever, but then all of a sudden, we're no longer a viable business now because we fucked it all up by being run by these fucking psychopaths.
Yeah, it's happened loads of times. Was it Philip Green?
He used to do that to Topshop, I think was one of them. That's not private equity. That's not these collateralized loans, but it's the same trick essentially over.
It's the same kind of bullshit. This is just level fucking 2. Yeah.
So I was reading, he's since gone very turfy and weird, so it's a bit of a shame, but he was once upon a time very good. So I was reading an old book by Matt Taibbi over the holiday called Griftopia, which is very good.
It's extremely good. I've read that one.
He once described, he was talking about the mortgage sector at the time, which blew up in 2008. And he once described the people making these shitty mortgage loans and then repackage them as tying a bow around a watermelon and throwing it out the window. Everybody only makes money while the watermelon is airborne, and the people making the money are not responsible when it hits the pavement. So what happens when we turn lots and lots and lots of global, but US and UK...
What I'm hearing is we need to be throwing more watermelons out windows.
So what happens if we took lots and lots and lots of US, but also increasingly UK and other countries' corporate debt, and we turn it into a big watermelon with a bow on it, we repackage that into a CLO, and then throw it out the window.
Place your bets.
CDR probably might make their money back on this Morrison's deal if they can find a sucker big enough to buy it off them in time. Goldman Sachs, who wrapped the debt and created the CLO, will definitely make its money because they made it through setting up the deal. They made it in their fees. Pension funds will make their monthly return as long as the Morrison's watermelon is zipping through the air. But what if, let's say, the overall interest rates rise because there's inflation, or there's a spike in energy prices and food prices and other commodity prices that supermarkets depend on to put the stuff in the shop so you can buy it? Mm-hmm. What happens if people decide that, there's a rat infestation in Morrison's and they just all decide to go to Tesco's? What happens when Morrison's doesn't make enough money to service the debt, let alone repay the capital? And what if they've done that not just with their own money, but with even more borrowed money? So what if we did all these things, and what if actually a lot of companies, and I do mean like a lot of them, including like about 20% of the US's biggest 3,000 companies, so about 600 of them, aren't actually earning enough to turn a profit, but are barely able to or even increasingly unable to service the interest payments on either the CLOs or the straightforward corporate bonds. And maybe that's become even worse because a company like CDR has come in and weighed the balance sheet down with even more billions in debt. Well, at that point, you get to a stage to what is fondly known as a zombie company. It's functionally dead.
They serve sandwiches, don't they?
It's functionally dead. Like it's not a going concern anymore, but it's shuffling along, powered by rolling over this pyramid of debt, and just as long as the market believes it can service the debt, it'll be fine. Current zombie
the famously
companies,
difficult shape to roll over.
These include, by the way, by any real measure, American Airlines, Carnival Cruises, Boeing, possibly one of them. But there's
good.
But there's more of them essentially every single day. According to Bloomberg, 600 of the US largest public traded companies, accounting for about $900 billion in corporate debt, leverage loans, and the like, are these zombies. They're only kept alive by low interest rate and a faith in the market that they'll make their next payment. But I think
these businesses continue existing through the power of sheer faith alone.
Yes.
These companies are powered by orcs.
Yes, yeah.
Wow, I look forward to the orc economy future.
Yeah. But what happens when, like I said, like with Morrison's, right? What happens if there's a giant spike in raw materials and the interest rates rise? And they can't...
That's easy, Rob. What you do is you get out and you go, NFTs, make it go faster! And you put NFTs on it, and it's
Line
fine,
goes
right?
wag.
Yeah.
There's a great fucking episode title, by the way. Cut that bit, but line goes wise, as far as I'm concerned. So essentially, what if there's more than $1 trillion out there in CLOs and way more in corporate debt, and they're just a big confidence scheme where everybody's just convinced each other that the watermelons they've tossed out the window actually have wings and can keep flying forever? Yeah. So
You'd think a plane company would know that's not true.
I don't know. I mean, Boeing definitely has experience with flying melons.
Yeah, and you know, as a little party trick,
another cunt for DLC as well.
As a little party trick, by the way, if the company that you're invested in by buying a mezzanine tranche of CLOs, and your pension fund has done this, for example, what if the CDR decides to sell a bunch of Morrison's stores and farmland without checking with the borrower? Because they're allowed to do that now because the contracts changed over time. So, you know, it used to be like, okay, the debt that I hold on Morrison's is worthless, but at least I can get my hands on the farmlands and the stores and the actual physical assets. I have something. So what if instead of that, you opened the big jar and it just had like 2 flies flying out of it instead of what you thought there might be in them? Because they might be able to. Depending on how shitty the agreement is, CDR might be allowed to do that. And all of a sudden, all that debt that your pension fund is holding is no longer underpinned by anything anymore. Not even like leverage ratios and anything. It's just there, a watermelon hurtling towards the ground. And you're the person, you know, tied to it. And in the last 2 months, subprime, which means the same as in housing, which means shitty, US corporate debt is starting to bobble big time. The amount that zombie-level corporates were able to borrow this year is down 75% from what they were able to borrow last year. And they've been able to issue less and less debt as well. That's not because they don't need the money, because they desperately do. But it's because nobody wants to lend to them anymore because the real economy is back. Because we're no longer in the world of 0% interest rates. And now, all of a sudden, there's a chance that you don't get your money back out of this and you cannot sell the flying watermelon on to the next sucker. Though the really junk-rated stuff, the really junk-rated stuff, like their value is like down 8 to 9%, their share value is already down by nearly 10% just on the idea that this might happen. And we haven't really seen central bank...
The orcs rearing their ugly heads once again.
And like
it is funny how this is exactly the same thing that tanked fucking Lunacoin or whatever. Like they stopped believing that the magic worked, and then poof, millions of dollars wiped out in an instant.
I mean, actually, Lunacoin, it kind of is. You know, the first statement you made there was correct, Alistair, because Lunacoin was in fact tanked by hostile action by a financial firm acquiring a controlling stake and using its leverage. Like, that is indeed what tanked it. Less about the belief, or what happened is they demonstrated that it couldn't work. And, well, I mean, we're about to see the same thing play out in slow motion, right, Rob?
Yeah. So, like, the really junk rated, and this is, again, I'm just talking about the straightforward corporate debt stuff now. I'm not talking about the CLOs yet. Like, their value is down somewhere between 8 and 10% on the year, and we haven't really seen the real interest rises by the central banks yet, or the full impact of inflation that's coming through the supply chain because of energy and food and all the other stuff that we talk about in this podcast. And this, mind you, this is on the visible end of the spectrum. These are like the straightforward bonds where American Airlines says, we're really shitty, but you should buy some of my debt on the expectation that we can forever roll it over. That's the visible stuff, and that's already tanking. The thing is with these leverage loans from private equity groups, because they're privately held, you don't get to see inside them because they don't have to tell you. This is not listed on the stock exchange. But what we do know is the market there is slowing down very quickly as well. From 80 billion in new CLO structures in January to only 6 billion in new creations in May. Again, this is according to Bloomberg. And according to the same article, about 620 publicly listed companies, the zombie ones, I was referring to energy, currently none of them are making enough money to cover the interest payments. And now...
I'm sure it's fine.
And now line is going up, but not in the fun way. The costs of everything are going up. And
they just need to believe in it harder, and then problem solved.
And then hilariously...
Wait, what the fuck? This fucking sucks.
Yeah. So some of the watermelons may be approaching, terminal velocity, essentially. But as they hit the pavement, consider the following. If they hit the pavement, the first layer that's just taken on too much debt and which they can no longer service.
Imagine 4 watermelons hitting the ground in sequence.
Exactly.
Finance works the same way.
Because that's the real dog shit layer, right? What the layer just above it is safe only as long as the interest rates don't rise only a little bit and the cost of raw materials rises only a little bit. But if they keep going up as sharp as they are, then the next layer of companies, so not the 600 dogshit ones, but let's say the 500 above them, will be pushed into the zombie state. And at that point, fuck knows what's going to happen. So all I'm saying is, at the end of all this, if you don't go shop at Morrison's, you may literally cause the next financial crash.
So, accelerationists, I hope you don't mind hunger.
I'm just going to say, Rob, listen, I'm sure that pavement is much further away than it appears.
Oh, wait, it may be. Like, this could... It doesn't need to blow up this way. I really want to be like clear about that. Like, a lot of these companies, like Boeing, for example, is systemically important to a lot of people. So they may well get a bailout. During COVID, we talked about it on the central banking podcast. During COVID, we already had like US central bank money literally going straight into the corporate sector because they said, if you don't give us the money right now, we will go bankrupt. That has already happened. So there's either the watermelons hit the pavement and it's 2008, but way bigger because it's systemic again.
Replacing shit has hit the fan with the watermelons hit the pavement.
Yeah.
In my lexicon at least.
Or, and this is your alternative, the central banks step in again, and this time they don't save the state, they start saving corporations.
I do struggle to believe that government would step in to save Morrison's of all things.
Maybe not.
Waitrose.
But what if it's not Morrison's? What if it's like Morrison's and 20 companies in the same sort of league and class all over the UK in different sectors all at the same time because they all have the same problem?
What if the entire supermarket chain collapses at roughly the same time because they all have to buy the same kind of shit and It's an entire sector that could potentially go completely fucking tits up.
Like Morrison's imploding, I agree. Like, yeah, the state will let that happen because, other supermarkets are available. But what if it's like and Morrison's and, I don't know, WH Smith and 3 engineering companies and. That's the point where it becomes systemic because they're all, I'm not suggesting this is definitively true, but they could very well all be relying on the same magic of rolling over their corporate debt because they know they can, in the current conditions, they can never repay the principal.
Well, we just need to get more orcs in to fix it.
Yeah.
That's what we need to do.
This suddenly explains to me, to my mind, the sudden corporate obsession with NFTs, etc. It's looking for a magic solution to patch the hole, isn't it?
It's the same as the fucking OBR. Like this is the private sector equivalent of the line going up being where the wizard fixes it. Substitute that for your NFTs, right?
Yeah, and it's so long. It is like the best way to think about it is genuinely like a war. Like as long as everybody believes in it, it has incredible power and it can drive spaceships through space and time. But when we don't believe it anymore, when there's a real problem, when like the engine fails, however it works, then
when Wile E. Coyote finally looks down.
Yes, thank you. That's even better. When Wile E. Coyote finally looks down and figures out that like the corporate debt sector is full of hot dog shit and the CLO sector is full of hot dog shit squared, but inside a box that you can't actually see the inside of because you're not allowed to. And also, they may have sold all the assets inside the box because they were allowed to. Anyway.
Awesome. Too many war bosses, not enough grots. Cool. Right, well, let's knock that in the head, shall we? I think that's been more than enough of an episode. We have a Patreon. Patreon.com/PraxisCash. You should join us there. You will get 1 bonus episode a month. At present, we are looking to get more patrons on so that we can build it up to 2 a month. So, get on, get involved, join us in the Discord, etc. We have t-shirts. That is praxiscast.tmail.com. You can wear a Chief O'Brien t-shirt where it challenges you to be in a fucking union, and you can wear it on a picket line, as someone did today, which is cool and good. We love to see it.
Yep.
We also have the streams. Streams are at present Thursdays definitely from about 7:30, I think, on Thursdays at twitch.tv/praxiscast. Mondays are on a slight hiatus at the moment. They may return soon. Stay tuned for more information on that one. And although Jamie's not here, listen to Peace at Home, a podcast with music by Jordan. And yeah, that's us, I think. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to announce, profess?
I have a final thought.
Oh dear.
In lieu of the comment at Commentariat Jubilee Edition, I leave you with a single thought, and that is Platty Jubs.
And on that note.
on that note, I need to go back to bed. Fuck me, this episode has not been good for my recovery.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.